Did you know that Link in Ocarina of Time is based on a famous Hollywood actor? Do you know about the Super Nintendo Zelda games you had to download off the internet? Have you ever seen the Japanese Legend of Zelda board game in action? What about the cancelled Zelda game in development by Retro Studios? Welcome to the Legend of Zelda Iceberg, where we will talk about all of this and more. If you are somehow new to the idea of an iceberg video, the premise is simple. An iceberg is a collection of facts, mysteries, theories, and ideas related to a given topic. The iceberg topics slowly get more obscure, in-depth, and often creepy as we get deeper down the iceberg. I love The Legend of Zelda more than just about anything, and I really love talking about the odd, obscure, and interesting corners of the lore, development secrets, and franchise discourse. A couple years ago, I found this iceberg on Reddit. It was unlike anything I had ever seen before. The sheer size of it blew me away. I sat on the image for a while before deciding it was my obligation, no, my destiny, to convert this behemoth into the biggest Zelda Iceberg video on YouTube. As you can tell, the image is a bit of a mess, so I sorted the entries into proper layers. I also added a handful of entries and reworded the titles of certain entries, so my iceberg is probably about 90% accurate to this one, with some slight changes here and there. I would love to give credit to the iceberg creator, but I unfortunately forgot to jot their name down, and their Reddit account has since been deleted. If you know the creator, or if you are the creator, please reach out so I can give you some much deserved credit. And thus, this is my endeavor to cover the entire iceberg. If you are clicking onto this video for the first time and you love icebergs as much as I do, I have great news for you. This is actually the second video in the series, which means you have an entire second iceberg about an hour and 40 minutes in length to enjoy. That being said, these videos are very much meant to stand on their own, so while you're certainly welcome to go watch that video first and come back, don't feel like you need to. It'll be there when you finish this one. A couple of disclaimers to make before I get into the iceberg, and you might be interested to hear a few of them, as one includes how you can take part in the next iceberg video. But if you just want to jump right into things, here's a timestamp to do so. First things first, a reminder that I was unable to make contact with the author, and as a result there are a few entries that I'm a bit unclear about, and I was only able to offer my best guess, so bear with me in that regard. The iceberg was created right after Breath of the Wild, so I added topics for Age of Calamity, Tears of the Kingdom, and Echoes of Wisdom to sort of flesh it out a bit. The bulk of this video was written before the release of Zelda Notes and Age of Imprisonment, so while they may be touched on, they will not be central to most of this video. This project is a massive collaboration between countless Zelda tubers, and I would like to thank the following people for taking the time to join me in this madness. Each person researched, wrote, and recorded their own parts, and this video would have taken a million times longer to finish without their effort. I hope you get a chance to see one of your favorite Zelda tubers in this video, and I promise there are many more to come in future videos. Finally, in the last video, I offered a way to play along with the iceberg, and it came in the form of a checklist. For each entry in the iceberg, you could check whether you already knew about the topic, whether it was brand new information for you, or somewhere in the middle. Here is a list of those who took part and their scores. A big thanks to everyone who played along. I've created a brand new checklist for this layer, and once again there is a link to download it in the pinned comment. Follow the information there if you would like to have your checklist score appear in the next video. And lastly, if you want to be alerted when the next iceberg video goes live, please consider giving me a subscription or turning on notifications if you're already subscribed. Without further ado, let's begin the iceberg. In the last video, we explored the very first layer of the iceberg, which in fact wasn't even part of the iceberg itself. The first layer was the sky, and in it we covered incredibly surface level topics. There was still plenty of interesting things to talk about, but we looked at things like obscure races in the Oracle games, the Lakeside Shark in Ocarina of Time, the Philips CDI games, the origin of Linkle, and popular game theory level theories such as the unified timeline. This is all stuff that's interesting to learn about, but it's no deeper than what you'd find in your average Watch Mojo top 10 video. It was enjoyable to explore these topics, but we weren't getting into very interesting territory. It's called the sky because we hadn't even reached topics that are worthy of being on the iceberg. With this video, we enter the next layer and finally enter the iceberg itself as we begin to explore the top of the iceberg. What you can expect is information that is sort of niche, but still somewhat well known. This is the kind of stuff that casual fans have no idea about, but most hardcore fans know. There's a lot of what we would consider to be trivia, but there's some interesting development info and theories on the list as well. Even if you're a hardcore fan, I think there's a lot of stuff here that's at the very least fun to hear about, even if it isn't brand new information. I also hope the checklist serves as a way to keep you entertained through stuff you already know. And now, let's explore the fascinating world of Zelda as we end our skydive through the first layer and finally arrive at the top of the iceberg. Majora's Mask, reused signs, repurposed content, etc. It's no secret that Majora's Mask contains a lot of reused content from Ocarina of Time. The game famously had an insanely short development time, and that simply would not have been possible without liberally reusing models, music, and just about everything else from Ocarina of Time. Even two of the most iconic characters from Majora's Mask, Skull Kid and the Happy Mask Salesman, are iterations on characters that were present in Ocarina of Time. The reuse of character models is pretty well known. Probably the vast majority of non-plot essential NPCs, and even a couple essential ones as we've seen from Ocarina of Time, are taken out of Hyrule and brought over to the land of Termina in Majora's Mask, given new identities and lives. Some of them are altered quite heavily, like Princess Rito becoming Lulu, and others are basically one-to-one translations, like the Cuckoo Lady becoming Anju. There are other areas where Majora's Mask reuses content from Ocarina of Time as well, like music. For example, Saria's song plays when you're trying to find your way out of the Woods of Mystery. Or how about the minigame rooms in Clocktown playing the Bombchu Bowling song from Ocarina of Time? Many entire mechanics are reused, like the aforementioned Woods of Mystery reusing the Lost Woods gimmick, and shooting gallery minigames functioning pretty much the exact same as they did in Ocarina of Time. Many tiny generic environmental objects like grass and rocks are the same, but the Zelda team did a frankly fantastic job of changing the environments themselves to the point that even the buildings and most of the important assets are brand new. They did a really thoughtful job for the most part, but there is one hilarious oversight. Entering Romani Ranch, you can see a massive sign marking the entrance. The funny part is that this exact sign can be found in Kakariko Village, and it still has the name of Kakariko Village at the top of it in Majora's Mask. Oops.
Jabu Jabu is Jaboon. In The Legend of Zelda The Wind Waker, we are introduced to several animalistic deities with resemblance to a couple of different characters or monsters from Ocarina of Time. The first one that we'll be taking a look at is Jaboon, a giant anglerfish who grants the Hero of Winds Nehru's Pearl, very reminiscent of Jabu Jabu, a giant fish within whom Princess Rito loses the Zora Sapphire in Ocarina of Time. Playing very similar roles in the hero's quests, granting the hero a pearl or spiritual stone accordingly, as well as sharing etymological similarities, it seems clear that Jaboon is meant to be a descendant of Jabu Jabu. In addition to all of that, the music that plays during the Jabu Jabu dungeon in Ocarina of Time is remixed to play when you meet Jaboon in The Wind Waker. This game is full of references to Ocarina of Time, but it almost feels inappropriate to call them references. The Wind Waker's world of Hyrule may look different, but it's still Hyrule. It's still a sequel to Ocarina of Time, it's the same world, and as many things have changed, many things have stayed the same too. And one of those things is this lineage of giant fishes.
Unreal Ocarina of Time. Ocarina of Time for many is considered as one of, if not the best Zelda game, and many wish for a total rebuild of the game from the ground up. This is not only something that has been wished for, but has been being built for the last 7 years by Kryzen X. The remake of sorts is being created using Unreal Engine, and has seen Kryzen recreate every texture, the menu and every area as if it were a new game. but with very familiar architecture and monster designs. The level design itself has changed dramatically, as verticality can now be explored further than it was possible on the outdated hardware of 1997. Meaning that extra levels and details could be added into the already beloved world of Ocarina of Time. There are some notable criticisms to be had, of course. First of all, recreating this sort of project on Unreal Engine is very time consuming, especially as it is a single creator working on this project, and every time a part of the project seems to be finished, a new build of Unreal Engine seems not far away, leaving Kryzen to have to rebuild his project all over again. The future does seem very bright for this project though, with new updates being shown regularly on Kryzen X's social links, showing off areas that have been completed.
Link's cleavage stare. Link is a notorious ladies' man, with some incarnations of Link having up to 5 potential love interests. Despite Link's ever-growing roster, he has always stayed very respectful. Well, for the most part. Yes, this entry is exactly like it sounds. Twilight Princess features a scene where Link first meets the bar owner Telma, and in this scene his eyes seem a bit distracted. For some reason, Nintendo decided to add a half second of animation where Link stares directly at her features. Damn it, Link! You're supposed to be a hero, not a pervert! And don't think you guys watching this are off the hook either. Nehru's second most viewed video ever has this exact same character on the thumbnail. Shame on you all.
Ocarina of Time Link is based on Leonardo DiCaprio. So this is another entry that is perhaps jumping to conclusions a bit, but it is a reasonable deduction to make, it just isn't quite confirmed fact. The idea that the appearance of the Hero of Time is based on Leonardo DiCaprio is a well-known piece of trivia, but where exactly does this come from? Well, it comes from an interview done in 2017. In the Arts and Artifacts book released by Dark Horse, it features an interview with series artists Yoshiki Haruhana, Yusuke Nanako, and Satoru Takizawa. They talk about how the art direction of The Legend of Zelda evolved as the series progressed. In particular, when reaching Ocarina of Time, they spent a good amount of time reflecting on the challenges inherent with transitioning Link from 2D to 3D, including having to design a much older Link. They had a strong concept of how they wanted the Hero of Time to look. Nanako specifies they were after a distinct uniqueness and coolness, and that Ocarina of Time needed to have a handsome, cool Link. Let's take a look at the excerpt from the interview. So, when you were illustrating Link, was there an inspiration for the character?
Yes, a rather world-famous Hollywood actor.
Huh? You mean that actor?
He is one good-looking guy.
Yeah, and at the time, if you were talking about a really good-looking actor, people immediately thought of this guy. So I recall keeping in mind the point of his nose and that strong-willed look in his eyes when I was drawing.
Actually, I remember Koizumi saying something similar as well. When the watercolor version was being worked on, that actor's name also came up.
Is that so? When I was presenting this piece, I did mention how I incorporated a little bit of that actor, but that tidbit didn't seem to win or lose me any points. In actuality, maybe it was just an unspoken approval of how I got it back then.
The 90s certainly had no shortage of handsome, cool, and unique male leads to base Link off, but there is a very clear number one candidate, and it is Leonardo DiCaprio. I'm dating myself a bit with this, but if you were born in the 2010s or even the 2000s, I don't think you can quite understand what a titanic presence Leo was in the 90s. He was the Hollywood heartthrob, on the wall of every teenage girl's bedroom, a bona fide icon. Juries are much more split on Mr. DiCaprio nowadays, but if you have any doubts about what I'm saying, let me just say this. You know how the 90s had Pokémania, the craze where the world just became absolutely head over heels obsessed with Pokemon, to the point where it became a genuine worldwide phenomenon? Well, there was such an insane fervor for Leonardo DiCaprio in the late 90s and early 2000s that there was also a Leo-mania.
Leo-mania is what they call it, and Leicester Square's seen nothing quite like it. From the moment guests arrived, the fans, made up of nearly all hormonally charged teenage girls, only wanted to see one man.
Here's an article about it, here's a documentary about it, here's a newspaper clip about it. The women fiended for Leo DiCaprio.
What would you do if you bumped into Leo right now? Like, you're like, oh, excuse me, and you're looking right in his face. What would you do?
God, I'd like kiss him or something. I don't know.
I would probably, first of all, be in shock, start screaming, and then
just clobber him, just probably like all the other girls.
So if Yusuke Nanako was basing his concept art of Link on a Hollywood actor that would have been considered cool and handsome in the 90s, Leo DiCaprio is the foregone conclusion. Add to that the fact that the Titanic marketing cycle was in full swing while Ocarina of Time was in development, and consider how much Link's blonde hair, blue eyes, pointed nose, and boyish features make him look like a young Leo, and it seems as though we have our man. Link from Ocarina of Time very much seems as though his concept art was based on Leonardo DiCaprio. This is not a surefire thing though. After all, they make a point to not truly reveal the influence, so there is some room for ambiguity. This is merely a logical deduction. I trace the popularity of this theory to a 2017 article written by the fantastic Jason Schreier where he theorizes as much, and this article is often used as proof, but it's worth pointing out that Jason himself makes it clear that this is only a theory. He's almost certainly right though.
Volvagia is Velu. The Legend of Zelda The Wind Waker also introduces us to a sky spirit named Velu. Velu is a colossal red dragon who lives atop Dragon Roost Island. In both name and appearance, Velu appears to be a reference to Volvagia from Ocarina of Time, a red dragon that the hero of Time fought as the boss of the Fire Temple. There are some differences in design. Volvagia is much thinner and more snake-like, and only has 2 arms. Velu is a bit thicker, built more like a flying brachiosaurus with 4 limbs. Interestingly, the dragons of Breath of the Wild are both snake-like and 4-limbed, threading the needle of incorporating aspects from both dragon designs. But let's talk about the home bases of these 2 dragons. Volvagia is found on Death Mountain, while Velu is found on Dragon Roost Island. Since Wind Waker's island, spoiler alert, exist in a flooded version of Hyrule, it is very possible that the Dragon Roost Island that we see in-game is the peak of Death Mountain. On Dragon Roost Island, we even see cave art depicting Gorons, and the music for Dragon Roost Cavern is borrowed directly from the Dodongo Cavern theme from Ocarina of Time. All of this points to the fact that Velu is a direct successor to Volvagia, possibly even its descendant. While Velu is a gentle beast on the side of good, and Volvagia is a monster among the forces of evil, we see also in Breath of the Wild that dragons are capable of being corrupted. Their morality isn't inherent, and it's encouraging that someone as monstrous as Volvagia, who ate Gorons, might have among their descendants Velu, an ally of the Hero of Winds, who fought directly against Ganondorf when given the chance. Spoiler alert, blazing his lair atop the Forsaken Fortress with his fiery breath and leaving it to burn.
As you may know, the Deku Toad is a mini-boss of Lakeside Temple in Twilight Princess. It's a large frog-like creature with wispy horns and eggs with shell on its back. It's also nothing like a Deku. As a result of this, a lot of fans wondered where the name came from. I mean, why do creatures with no plant-like features get named after a species of plant people? Well, as it turns out, the answer is a bad translation. You see, while the term Deku is often associated with plants, the Deku Toad's Japanese name doesn't actually come from that. Instead, it's Deku Toad, or Big Toad, referring simply to its enormous size. But the localization team misread it, assumed it was Deku Toad, and gave it a name that doesn't make any sense. The joys of etymology, am I right?
Zonai Spiral. Have you ever seen an image that is capable of single-handedly provoking mystery? A symbol that with no words written can evoke conspiracy and suggest endless connections to the darkest parts of society? Even the mere sight of it can cause fear and intrigue. We are, of course, talking about the Zonai Spiral. What did you think we'd be talking about? Prior to Tears of the Kingdom, the Zonai were a mysterious ancient civilization from which we knew hauntingly little. We had a handful of ruins with Zonai symbology, we had a set of barbarian armor, and we had a recurring symbol that could be found all over Hyrule. From appearing on the cubes used in Korok puzzles, on many of the statues, to being embedded in many of the walls that make up the Zonai ruins, the Zonai Spiral could be found everywhere in Breath of the Wild. Even one of the islands surrounding the continent continent is suspiciously spiral-shaped. The mystery of this perplexing symbology was tantalizing to Zelda theorists, and it wasn't long before they started going absolutely wild with speculation, with the exactness of the Zonai spiral as an image quickly no longer being a guideline, and the mere existence of a spiral in any form or fashion seeming to be a secret tie to the Zonai. The Zelda theory community entered what I would refer to as Zonai mania, and this single symbol was seen as not only the key to solving Breath of the Wild's lore, but to solve deeply held mysteries in past games as well. Suddenly, theorists began sorting through past Zelda games with a fine-tooth comb, and where there was a spiral of any kind, there was a connection to the Zonai. Midna has a swirl on the fused shadow. The Twilight are clearly ancestors of the Zonai. The walls of the Tower of the Gods have swirl patterns. Clearly the Zonai were related to the gods. The Guardians and Skyward Sword have Zonai patterns on their helmets. These are Zonai devices. The Kokiri symbol looks like a spiral. The Kokiri are actually Zonai. The Skyward Sword pirate ship has a spiral pattern on the door. Clearly this is a Zonai pirate ship, confirming the existence of Zonai buccaneers. It's all connected. The Sheik are Zonai. The Interlopers are Zonai. The Ancient Tribe are Zonai. Tingle is a Zonai. Everything is a Zonai.
Oh my gosh, is that a Zonai swirl?
The Zonai literally became the Illuminati of the Zelda series, and the Zonai swirl, or spiral, became the Illuminati symbol. Naturally, when it became obvious that Tears of the Kingdom was going to be about the Zonai, the fanbase lost their minds.
And we
hell yeah.
it.
That's so cool. Okay, whoa, look at the drop.
Moving
Soldier
on.
construct horn and Zonai charge.
We've now explored more of this Sky Island. As expected,
dude, I love
fighting with just a
durability.
branch
It
won't get
forces
us
you
very
to
far.
use new
Also,
weapons.
this branch is almost broken. So here's another one
So
of
this
Link's
is the
new
Zonai.
abilities.
And launched into even more intense speculation until the game came out and the Zonai really only had a token appearance with not much of anything about their history or culture really shown. This was a devastating blow to a lot of Zonaiologists, though a good number of them are still doing work making connections where they can. If you want to get a comprehensive look at pre-Tears of the Kingdom Zonaiology at its finest, hie thee hence over to the channel of Nintendo Black Crisis and watch his many excellent videos on the topic.
The Groose, Gerudo, Ganondorf connection. One of the most memorable characters of Skyward Sword is a bombastic young man named Groose. Originally providing comedic relief as a school rival to Link, by the end of the game he has one of the best character arcs of the series as he grows into a hero, teaming up with Link's allies to take down Demise. But a popular theory is that Groose's presence in the game has a deeper meaning, that he is the forefather of the Gerudo people, and perhaps created the cursed bloodline that led to Ganondorf. So why is that? Well, on a surface level, we can look at his appearance. Groose is the biggest guy in Skyloft, tall and muscular with a bright red pompadour. Many of his physical traits strongly evoke those of Ganondorf and the Gerudo people. Throughout the games, we see that the Gerudo are known for their impressive stature, strong builds, and bright red hair. The resemblance is certainly hard to ignore. But even more than that, in Ganon's absence, Groose serves as a symbol of power in the game, completing the mythical trio that we see over and over again. While he begins the story abusing his powerful nature as a bully, by the end, he's a loyal ally to Link and Zelda. In fact, he's arguably a big part of why they're able to beat Demise at the end of the game. Upon his defeat, and in a rage, Demise curses future reincarnations of Link and Zelda to be followed by an incarnation of my hatred for all time. But what if Groose, who was also a participant in Demise's downfall, was also cursed? Perhaps his line was destined to reincarnate as Demise's hatred in the form of Ganondorf. In a way, that would make Groose's part of the curse the most tragic. His hard-won transformation from bully to hero would be rendered meaningless, as his descendants would be forced to embody the very evil he helped destroy.
Error and Bagu. The Adventure of Link gets a lot of flack from the community for its difficulty and dramatically different gameplay from the rest of the series. But I actually love this game. It was a big part of my childhood. Its huge, multi-continental map is incredibly fun to explore once you have the experience and you've built Link up enough to handle its random enemy encounters. It took me years to discover all of its secrets, in part because the few hints the game does give you can be very hard to decipher. One of these is the secret location of Bagu, a man found in the forest north of the river town of Saria. The forest he inhabits goes unnamed in the game, but according to the Zelda Valiant comics, it's known as Maruge Forest, no idea if I'm pronouncing that correctly, which shares a name with the adjacent Maruge Swamp. Although it's generally accepted that Bagu lives like a hermit in this secluded building in the woods, I actually like to think he is a man of means, and this is his private chalet, like a private hunting lodge or cabin, his own little getaway in the woods. The thing is that this appears to be Bagu's second home, as he already has a home in Saria Town. It also appears he has servants under his employ, and that he is a man of considerable influence. If you visit Bagu's home in town, his servant, a bot, will tell you the following: "Let me be, master is in woods, north of river." And that's it. That's literally the only hint the game will give you of Bagu's whereabouts. It's up to you to figure out which river and forest the bot is referring to, and that this unnamed master is critical to completing the game. If you try to cross the river in Saria without talking to Bagu, a knight will deny you and say, "Only townfolk may cross this river." Once you find Bagu and speak to him, he'll say, "Bagu is my name, show my note to Riverman." Then when you go back to Saria Town and speak to the knight, he'll let you through and say, "You know Bagu? Then I can help you cross," thus completing the Bagu side quest. Yet Bagu has one more secret up his sleeve. Oh wait, he's not wearing sleeves. Well anyway, Bagu has a companion of sorts who delivers arguably the only memorable line from this entire game, and one of the most iconic lines from the franchise. In the northwest of the map, nestled in the mountains, is Rito Town. There you will find an NPC who is identical to Bagu except for the color of his sleeveless tunic. When you first speak to him, he'll say, "I am Error." But there is another man in town who will give you a hint about Error's purpose. Ask Error of Rito about the palace. At which point, if you go back to Error, he'll reveal, "South of King's Tomb in Mido is a tunnel," which will lead you to the island palace and conclude this side quest. Many people believe that Error's name is, well, an error. They assume that some line of code was goofed up and that instead of serving up Error's real name, it's giving you the video game equivalent of the internet browser 404 not found error. But the truth is that Error is a faithful translation of its original Japanese name, and his name is a cheeky reference to errors in computer code, and what's more, Bagu's name is thusly a reference to computer bugs, but the translators goofed it up, and so us English speakers missed out on the joke. So the pair were meant to be Error and Bug, but ironically, Error was correctly translated, while Bagu was not.
The Japanese board game. This refers to the Legend of Zelda board game that was released in 1986. It was developed by Bandai and the name was The Hyrule Fantasy, named of course after the Japanese name for the very first Legend of Zelda game. This is because, as the name suggests, the game was only ever released in Japan. Your mind may immediately be jumping to an American board game, which we covered in the first layer of the iceberg, but actually these are two entirely different board games, and the only thing they really have in common is being about the NES Zelda game and having somewhat similar gameplay mechanics. This board game is pretty rare nowadays, and it may have remained a mystery to us Westerners for all of time, since Nintendo clearly had no intention of ever bringing it to us. But thanks to the tremendously hard work of a handful of people, the entire game was translated into English and the pieces were scanned, so you can print them out and play the game yourself. I have a link to the project in the pinned comment, and the names you're seeing on screen right now are those who put in the man hours to make playing this version of the game possible at all. Again, it's impossible for the game to avoid comparisons with its American counterpart, but they truly are vastly different games. The American board game is tremendously simple. It's very much in the same vein of those licensed board games based on cartoons and movies that you played when you were a kid. And falling in line with that, it's so simple a kid could comfortably understand it. A game session can be finished easily in under 20 minutes. Hyrule Fantasy, on the other hand, has significantly more depth. Even a comparison comparison between the boards of the two games can convey my point. Now don't get me wrong, Hyrule Fantasy is still a very simple board game at the end of the day. Twilight Imperium this is not, but it does have a fair number of rules, and the game has quite a bit of meat. After a few learning rounds, our first full play session took around an hour and 40 minutes to complete. The goal of the game is to venture around the overworld battling monsters and collecting items, which will allow you to tackle the dungeons, each of which is in the same location as the dungeons in the game. Beating a dungeon gives you items and Triforce pieces, and once you've collected everything, you can then journey to Death Mountain and challenge Ganon himself. The first player to slay Ganon wins the game. The game takes place on a board that represents Hyrule, and each player is represented by a Link figure. There are battle cards which represent the monsters you'll be fighting, and labyrinth cards which represent the bosses at the end of each dungeon. Item cards represent different items that can be obtained, either through exploration or purchase, such as the white sword or the magical shield. Rupee cards represent currency that's primarily gained by defeating monsters and can be spent on items and potions. These heart chits represent your health. There's a spot on the board for Triforce pieces earned after defeating enemies at the end of a dungeon, and each of which also gives an item to the player, though most of them are just there for looks. These cards are used for a gambling minigame in which players take turns flipping over cards. The person to get the Moblin gains 50 rupees, and the person to get the Old Man loses 50 rupees. There is, of course, Ganon, and lastly, the dice. The dice are what you use to do battle. As we said, the game takes place on a game board that matches the overworld of The Legend of Zelda, broken into quadrants that match the screens of the original game. A player moves about the squares, but they have to do so following the actual paths of the board. A player attempting to move through this wall would be unable to do so. They have to go around. Additionally, many spaces on the board mention requiring an item to go through a square, such as needing a raft to reach a dungeon, or needing to roll a certain number to advance through the Lost Woods. The heart pieces on your character sheet represent your health. If you take damage, you lose hearts, and you can regain them with potions and resting at a fairy fountain. If you lose all of your hearts, you go back to the very beginning, and you have to skip a turn. Additionally, the hearts determine your movement on the overworld, as every turn, you may move a number of squares equal to your number of hearts. Thus, taking damage also makes you slower. While you're moving about the overworld, at any point in your turn, once per turn, you can choose to battle a monster. When this happens, you flip over a showdown card, which either has some sort of trap which harms you, or reveals a monster for you to fight. Battling is done by taking 2 dice and rolling them, trying to meet or beat the monster's attack power. Success provides healing or ever valuable rupees, whereas a loss has a penalty that generally involves taking damage. When a player reaches a dungeon, they may choose to challenge the dungeon monster, in which they draw a random labyrinth card, which will determine the boss that you're facing. You then roll the dice, but instead of rolling 2, you roll dice equal to the number of hearts you have. This time, you're looking to roll specific symbols instead of paying attention to numbers, and each boss will clarify what you need to beat them. For example, Aquamentus is easy, requiring just one of either the sword, bomb, or magical rod. The mighty Gleeok, on the other hand, can only be beaten by rolling a sword. If you win, you get a Triforce piece corresponding to that dungeon. If you lose, you're teleported to the nearest fairy fountain. As I mentioned earlier, you also gain the item listed on the Triforce piece, although almost all of them are just there for flavor. I think only the raft actually serves a purpose. But all pieces of the Triforce must be collected before you can face Ganon. Items that actually do something come in the form of item cards. Some of them can be bought by spending rupees at a shop, others are obtained by questing around the map. You start with the basic sword, and you can upgrade to the white sword, which makes enemies easier to fight, and then the magical sword, which is needed to beat Ganon. The power bracelet is a pain in the butt to get, but very useful, as it allows warping between 2 warp spots. Potions can be bought at the store, but only after the player obtains the letter. Once they do, a red potion costs 100 rupees and a blue potion costs 50. Drinking a potion restores your hearts, a red turns into a blue after use, and a blue is discarded. So basically, a red potion gives 2 uses, a blue potion gives 1. The blue ring costs a hefty 250 rupees, but it gives the player a massive additional 2 hearts, which is a big deal as that gives you 2 extra movement and 2 extra dice against bosses. Food can be purchased for 50 rupees, and while its only purpose is to protect you from a specific monster card, that card comes up a lot, so it's worth carrying one. Lastly, there's the magical shield, which costs 100 rupees and protects you from Zora, which will instantly beat you otherwise. The game is played in turns, and each player's turn consists of 2 parts, moving and battling. You can move anywhere on the board that you have both enough movement to reach and a valid path to. At any time during your turn, you can do 1 fight per round. If this is on a regular square, this will be against a monster. If you're on a dungeon, it'll be against a labyrinth boss. After moving and battling, you pass your turn to the next player. The game will continue until one player is qualified to battle Ganon. This means they will have all of the Triforce pieces, as well as a copy of every item, including seemingly optional items like the letter and the magical shield. The only exception is a potion, but you should probably have one of those anyways. Once a player is ready, they can venture to Death Mountain and challenge Ganon himself. Battling him is very straightforward. You get 4 dice, and your roll needs to contain both a magical sword and a silver arrow. If you have neither, you lose and go back to the fairy fountain. If you have one but not the other, you lose and go back to the fairy fountain. If you have both, you've defeated Ganon and you win the game. Congratulations. The Japanese board game is mostly very linear, but there is a little bit of choice in deciding when to make a break for the items that you'll eventually need to reach Ganon, like the magic shield. Do you go for it right away and risk the other players getting ahead of you, or do you save it for last and risk giving the other players time to catch up? As a board game, it isn't particularly deep, though I certainly think it's a step above your average 1980s licensed board game, and it certainly is more in-depth than the insanely simple American game. It certainly has its flaws, but I did enjoy playing through it, and I wouldn't mind taking a couple hours to play it again in the future. If you want to give the game a try, I'll leave a link to the translation project for printing out, but I will also heartily recommend the module for Tabletop Simulator, which is what you've been seeing on the screen this entire time.
Rauru equals Gaepora equals Gaepora. When Link leaves the Kokiri Forest for the first time and ventures out into Hyrule Field, he immediately runs into Gaepora. This long-winded but well-meaning owl is a constant presence during the child portion of Ocarina of Time, but he's nowhere to be found upon Link's arrival 7 years in the future. Or is he? In actuality, Gaepora is the first person Link meets when he regains consciousness after obtaining the Master Sword, because the owl's true identity is actually Rauru, the Sage of Light. No, not that one. That one. While there's never been confirmation of an explicit connection between Rauru from Ocarina of Time and Headmaster Gaepora, Zelda's father from Skyward Sword, their human forms look alike, and Gaepora even has some owl-like features. His name being a reference to Gaepora is fitting, considering the other residents of Skyloft are named after birds as well. Plus, they share the most important detail in common, which is, of course, watching Link sleep. Gaepora also makes an appearance in Four Swords Adventures, and you have to wonder, is this the same person? If so, how old is Rauru at this point? Does time in the Sacred Realm move at a different rate? And speaking of his other appearances, he's even got a Terminian counterpart that seems to be unaffected by Link's time travel. Is it possible that Gaepora is more powerful, possibly even more sinister than we originally thought?
The BS Legend of Zelda games. In 1995, Nintendo partnered with a company called Saint Giga in order to produce a device for the Super NES that would allow this gaming console to download information directly from space. They called this new device the Satellaview. It was a physical block that you would attach to the bottom of your Super NES, and it would allow you to access a satellite that would then transmit information to your Super NES. Doing this granted you access to a slew of games completely unique to the system, especially Zelda games. 4 different Zelda games were featured on the Satellaview: BS The Legend of Zelda, BS The Legend of Zelda Map 2, and The Legend of Zelda Ancient Stone Tablets. There also was a re-release of A Link to the Past, but it was an unchanged version of the original game, the only difference being that you could download it from space. No, the real interesting meat and beans comes from the other games that I just mentioned. The first 2 being BS Zelda and BS Zelda Map 2, which stands for Broadcast Satellaview Zelda. These were a remaster of the first Zelda game, but with a completely new set of dungeons and voice acting. Map 2 also features a new overworld. The third game was Ancient Stone Tablets, and it was a sequel to A Link to the Past that takes place 6 years after Link defeats Ganon. However, unfortunately, you could only play these games in 1-hour sessions once a week during the times when St. Giga's satellites were operational for gaming, and this was only available in Japan. So sadly, after the Satellaview was discontinued, so were all of its games, meaning that it's impossible to play these exclusive Zelda games anymore. Unless you emulate. Shout out to the BS Zelda website.
Hi, I'm Cap Bergerson, and I just shaved, so I look extra babyface today. So, the BS Zelda games, maybe you've heard of them, and if not, then I think it's Bread's job to bring you up to speed. I happen to have a couple of reproduction cartridges. These are essentially fan-printed works, but they run on original consoles. So essentially, someone had the ROMs for these BS Zelda titles and was able to squeeze them onto a cartridge and make them playable in some state. I don't know how much modding was involved in these. At the very least, I think they are translated to English, but I haven't actually ever tested them. So on top of taking the opportunity to make a guest appearance in the video and show you guys some footage of the games running, I also get to test them out for myself and see if they actually work. It's a win-win, right? I didn't buy these were gifted to me, so I don't know where they are from, who had the ROM, who printed them, I don't even know. But I do think they are fascinating little oddities. And I will note that these won't be them running in their, shall we say, complete state. I assume at least that the voiceover and the timed events and things like that that were part of the BS Zelda experience won't be present here at all. But let's crack these open and have a look. This one is just how it is, like so. But this one, Ancient Stone Tablets, they actually went through the efforts of packaging it in a pretty official looking box. It looks very, like a Super Nintendo package. They even have stuff on the back, and I guess that's who it is made by, is Flashback Entertainment. There we go. I'm assuming both are probably that, but I don't know. Here's the instruction manual. Oh wow. They put a lot of work into this. Oh, interesting. Week 1, week 2, week 3. So again, this was, these are the broadcasting dates for these areas and which parts of the games you could play. Wow, okay, so they've got like the whole bunch of works here. Wow. I'm not going to read every page, but I'm going to flip to every page. The Hero of Light is the character you play as. They are your avatar character, it's not Link. Now, I believe you could have a custom character with the Satellaview system. Obviously, this being a repro cart, it just gives you these guys. Some items. More items. Extra features. The mall! Interesting. Rental shop. There's some mini games. It is funny that they have some Zelda 1 and 2 artwork like sprinkled in here too. Enemies, of course. Bosses. We've got 4 bosses. Never mind, there's more. And of course, this artwork is really cool. that's very cool artwork. And a section for notes, if you want to deface your book. What else did they give me here? Oh. I'll pull it out this way. Basically the box art. It's just the Ganon artwork here. Interesting. And there's some other goodies packed in here too. Actually, this is a pretty cute poster that I've apparently had all this time. And it's double-sided. Zelda Legend of Link. I don't know what that is, but but you've got your Link to the Past artwork is actually kind of stretched. Interesting. What else do we have here? They give us a lot of random stuff. Oh, that's neat. Interesting. BS, The Legend of Zelda, but it is just Zelda 1 artwork. I don't know if they're allowed to print these. Very cool. And for some reason, Samus, Mega Man, so Link as seen in Soul Calibur, Mario as seen in Smash Bros. Brawl. Here's the cartridge. Of course it's gold. It had to be, right? There we go. I will say it has the cartridge itself has a very different feel to it than standard Super Nintendo cartridges. But very cool. Oh, this is a good warning. Press reset button to cycle through weeks 1 through 4. Once you start playing week 1, you must continue in order. Do not skip around. This will erase your save file or corrupt it. I guess that was their way of mimicking the broadcast times with this. Very cool. So there's that. And then, of course, this one with the Zelda 1 remake maps. Very cool. Now, I happen to have this old TV, this 15-year-old Panasonic that does still take composite inputs. So I was able to hook my Super Nintendo up to it with no problem. This is the moment of truth. So we're gonna just start with the Zelda 1 and 2 maps. Zelda 1 maps 1 and 2 from the BS Zelda cartridge. This is a moment of truth. Oh.
Editor's note by Nehru here. The next chunk of video is Captain showing off gameplay from each of the Satellaview games. I think it's pretty cool stuff and I definitely recommend watching it, but if you want to move on to the next entry, there's a timestamp on the screen that you can go to.
It's got a bit of a twanginess to the soundtrack here. And they fixed the Ganon typo. Okay, we'll just see how this goes. See, this is really interesting because I know Zelda 1 really well. It's a game I love and I replay every so often. So it's almost a little surreal seeing Zelda 1 and all these Zelda 1 sprites, but just like a little different than how I'm used to it. Do you know what I mean? It says, please listen up when playing for details. Okay. Great. And we can choose between map 1 and map 2, so Zelda 1 infamously has a second quest. I'm more familiar with map 1. Let's do that. It's dangerous to go alone. Right. Very fancy sword beams. Okay, cool, very cool. Oh, I went to look to say something and then I got bodied by an Octorok, of course. Oops. This is why you should pay attention to the games that you're playing. Well, we can make our way over to the first dungeon and let's just see how that goes. Now this... I have heard that the map is a little scaled down. But I definitely feel like we hit that shore too soon. Alright. The Eagle Dungeon. Oh. I actually really like this take on the dungeon theme. That's really good. Yeah, the dungeon itself looks really good. The environmental details, the sprite work and all that is superb. I think the layout is different. Come to think of it. I don't know what that was. I straight up don't know what that was. Oh, I guess, so something happened that I was able to shoot sword beams even though I'm not at max health. Yeah, so it's different. Normally in the Eagle dungeon, there's a doorway to the right of the entrance here. I think they've just shifted the entrance over a few rooms or something. It's definitely different. But we got some snakes. Actually, those are called rope. Oh, there's the map. Okay. The dungeon map, you can see here, forms an S. I'm pretty sure I did select first quest, or map 1. But I'm wondering if, for some reason, if they either remixed it, or I somehow accidentally ended up in map 2. Because the map 2 dungeon layouts are all shaped after letters. That probably means I didn't go far enough west at the entrance, so I'm gonna backtrack. Let's say I find this Link sprite really entertaining because it's like sort of a Link to the Past sprite, but with the Zelda 1 Link's proportions. It's just a little funny. There's the bow, of course. And I'm almost dead. That's not good. Okay, we got some Goria. Oops. Oops. Okay. Oh, it drops me way back here. Jeez, dying to those Goria. That's embarrassing. Oh well. Goria. Okay. Here we go. You know, this all does make me wonder. With the recent Nintendo Direct, they announced Virtual Boy coming to NSO, which is bonkers. And I can't help but wonder why not Satellaview? Alright, we're almost there. We're in the last leg. We got some more Gorias. Are we gonna get Wall Masters? Yeah. I was like, this room's empty. I know what's gonna happen. Goodbye, Wall Masters. Okay. Aquamentus. He didn't even attack. Something was off with that. I really just pummeled him out of existence. He didn't even fire off a shot. Very strange. Okay. And of course... Oh, wow. Like the rotating triangle. The Triforce piece is like... I don't know. Very A Link to the Past title screen, you know. Okay. Well, that was level 1. It wasn't quite the eagle. But... Okay, well, here's what we're going to do. Is we're going to reset. Because I can't figure out how to quit out of there. Okay. Let's try this. Pretty sure I picked map 1 before. Oh yeah, this is a different starting area in map 2, so... Alright. There we go. Okay, so let's switch gears for a moment. And we'll pop in the other cartridge. And see how this goes. This one is the Ancient Stone Tablets cartridge. And let's see how this goes. Okay. BS, The Legend of Zelda, Ancient Stone Tablets, Chapter 1. A new adventure has begun in Hyrule. 6 years ago, okay, it said 6 months in the manual. 6 years ago, it says here. The hero Link threw down the King of Evil. This is like a slideshow cutscene. Each night I have dreamt the same dream. The black shadow over the vast temple. Why does it haunt my memories? No, I can only hope that nothing terrible will happen. Oh, wow. It's a very dramatic title screen. Ah, so you've awakened, young child, from another world. You were warped in a mysterious light which brought you here, although I don't know what it was. So, naturally, I do not know who you are, but according to Princess Zelda, this land of Hyrule once again faces a crisis, and only you can stop it. Okay, I didn't believe it at first, but now I think we ought to heed those words. Learn more, you must go to the Eastern Temple. Location is marked on your map. Okay. And I got a big old bag. You can carry an assortment of items. It's very practical. This will help you carry anything that you find on your journey. Be careful as you go. If there's something you don't understand, return here. I can give you some good advice. Now, I've already got the ocarina, bug catching net, a golden bee, and a lantern, of course. And that's a pretty familiar looking Hyrule. This is the world of A Link to the Past, as we all know it. Although it's interesting we start off here with 4 hearts, but I don't have a sword. Okay, and I goofed it. So, swordless Eastern Palace run. Oh, this is a little different though. Listen carefully. It's easy to break down walls that look crumbled. Set a bomb at such a wall and a path will open. Okay, alright, yeah. And there is dialogue at the bottom here. Find yourself lost in the labyrinth. Play your ocarina. Interesting. You'll soon find yourself back at the dungeon entrance. So instead of the magic mirror, we can use the ocarina to warp out. Interesting. I guess not unlike Majora's Mask Song of Soaring. Okay. Ah, we've got a level 1 sword. Yes. And listen carefully. Use an item to open a path through the fragile part of the left wall. And, oh, okay, well, I don't have bombs. So we'll just carry on. I'm sure we'll find bombs soon enough. Speak of the devil. Ah, there's a shield. You can block arrows and stones. Now, the other path did have some more stuff. But I guess we'll... Oh. And the compass, of course. I'm gonna take a look back the other way. Okay. Ah, there's the map, of course. There we go. Now, it looks like the old tried and true technique. I will say, just looking at the map, pretty interesting sort of redesign for the Eastern Palace. Not sure if I like it more than the, frankly, masterfully crafted one in A Link to the Past, but, you know. What I'm going to do is I'm going to just take this and move the camera a little closer to the screen so you don't have to look at the back of my head so much. There we go. Ah, the classic treasure chest. Except an inverse of that, in a way. Now, I don't have the big key. Oh, I do have the big key. Okay, hold on then. I missed the big chest. Because I thought I didn't have the big key. But here it is. It is the bow. It looks like I have infinite arrows, according to the HUD. So that's interesting. Oh, and Pegasus boots. Very nice. Let's have a look over here. Oh, there's a guy here. Looks like you're in for trouble. Do you want to carry more arrows? For 50 rupees. Looks like I have infinite arrows, but sure, we'll see what happens. Well, I don't know. Okay, I'm gonna backtrack to see those rooms I missed, though. What's interesting is that if you let go of the A button here, Link just stops in his tracks. Yep, there it is. Okay. Well, oops. It's just gonna be money, isn't it? It is. Oh my gosh, okay. That's something most mainline Zelda games don't let you do. Is turn with the Pegasus boots? That's pretty interesting. Okay, here we go. Armos Knights. Oh, oopsie. Let's switch back. Easy peasy. Easy peasy. You got a strange stone tablet. Does this stone tablet have some kind of significance? Is it ancient? Oh. Here I was thinking I would call it after I finished the dungeon, but like it's all foggy here, like the Lost Woods. Well, maybe we'll go and talk to Sahasrahla and see what's up. Their dialogue did sort of foreshadow this. You'll need the flippers to cross deep water and continue your quest. They can be found at Zora Falls. If you have the boots, try holding down the A button. Okay. Interesting. And there's a Zora just out here. Okay. Alright, very interesting. And now it's raining instead of being foggy. And also unable to use bombs in rainy areas. So little events like this don't normally happen in A Link to the Past, obviously. Also, I guess my little infinite arrows thing wore off. That's fine. I guess I'll buy some arrows. Oh, look. A piece of heart. Oh, this house is different. You know, in some ways, it almost feels like playing some kind of weird ROM hack. Oh, hey. 100 rupees. Very worth it. And, shovel? But they're timed, which is interesting. I'm gonna be real with you all. I don't want to spend all this time farming rupees just to just to do this. So I'm gonna stop recording this here. But there you go, a little preview of the BS Zelda titles here. Actually, I wonder if I just shut it off here. There we go. Hope you enjoyed that little look at how that works.
Inti Creates CEO Takuya Aizu says Adventure of Link is his dream remake. Takuya Aizu is the CEO and president of the video game development company Inti Creates. For reference, Inti Creates is best known for the Mega Man Zero series, but they're responsible for a handful of other popular series like Azure Striker Gunvolt and Gal Gun? Anyways, in July of 2018, the gaming magazine Nintendo Force dropped an interview with Takuya Aizu in which they discussed Gunvolt, the upcoming Bloodstained Curse of the Moon, and his career in general. It's the second last question of the interview which is of interest to us. If you could make a game in any Nintendo franchise with an unlimited budget, which would you choose and why? Just one? Well, I would love to make a new The Adventure of Link for the modern era. This created the same stir that is always created when an industry member admits a love for another game or franchise. And soon, the idea that Aizu was tied to a future Adventure of Link remake was being written about on many major Nintendo news websites. It got to the point where Aizu made another statement about it, reiterating his love for Adventure of Link and willingness to work on a remake, but clarifying that he had no relationship with Nintendo and it's merely a dream project, not something currently in production. In an interview with Nintendo Life in August 2019, he clarifies, "Firstly, it wasn't so much that I wanted to make it from a business perspective. I was asked during an interview if I could make a game using a Nintendo character, what would I like to make? I really loved The Legend of Zelda, so I answered that if I could make The Adventure of Link, I would be really happy. That story kind of blew up, but it wasn't really something I was thinking about from a business perspective that I would like to make it, but simply that if I could make a game using Nintendo characters, that it would be The Adventure of Link. And I still think that, but our company and I don't really think it is realistic that we could make a game using Nintendo characters. But if after such a long time, such a miracle could happen, that would be really great, but we think it's unlikely." He also specifies his love for The Legend of Zelda. Well, it's The Legend of Zelda that I really love, right from when it first came out for the Famicom Disk System. I don't think there are any Nintendo characters I'd like to work on other than that. Of course, Nintendo has loads of appealing characters, and plenty you could make games with. That's really great. I'd sort of let it be known that I love The Adventure of Link. There are plenty of other great games, but that's my favorite. I'm with Aizu. I love The Adventure of Link too, janky mess that it is. I think a remake would allow them to smooth out that jank and let people see Adventure of Link for the gem that it is underneath the rough surface. I would also love for a guy like Aizu, who has extensive experience making excellent side-scrolling games, to be given that opportunity. A shame nothing seems to be coming from this.
The Parella become the Zora. One of the things that all fans of the Zelda series look forward to with each iteration of the series is the inclusion of new races and characters. And with The Legend of Zelda Skyward Sword being the first step in the recognised timeline, fans of the series were not left disappointed, as not one but 3 races were introduced. The Kikwi, the Mogma, and the subject of this part of the iceberg, the Parella. The Parella are an aquatic race reminiscent of a real-world mixture of a seahorse and a jellyfish. They inhabit Lake Floria and live under servitude of one of the deity dragons, Faron. As Skyward Sword's only aquatic race, they were initially designed to look more like their modern day equivalent in the Zora, a race of fish-based humanoids. In the initial concept drawings of the Parella, they were initially designed to be based a lot closely to the Zora race with more humanoid figures, but scaled skin and hats made of other potential sea-living creatures. However, the artists were informed that the design should be more primitive, which led to another concept with the Zora's more fish-like features being made to look more like ancient creatures, even with some having a lamp on a stem hanging from their heads, similar to that of an anglerfish. These designs were also ultimately scrapped, in favour of the less threatening looking design that gave the Zora a more childlike appearance, almost blending what we know now as the modern Rito design along with the Zora, but again this idea was rejected, leading us to invertebrates that now fill the sea. A part of this design change could have been down to the fact that the development team actually always wanted to take these creatures away from being too similar to the Zora. This would be because it would confuse players. The Zora, after all, have always been known for living in open seas and have long been worshippers of the deity of all fish, Lord Jabby Jabby. To be in servitude of a dragon, much less one that's associated closer with forests such as Faron, may have been slightly contradictory to the story of the Zora. However, some elements of the Zora have remained with the Parella, in particular their offspring. Within Skyward Sword, you are sent on a mission to recover all of the Tadtones, or Parella eggs from the lake. These take on a particular shape, musical notes, in particular clefs and double clefs with eyes. The similarity here is with the Zora eggs and most notably when they hatch like in Majora's Mask. You're sent on a mission to collect Zora eggs from the pirate's fortress. Once you've received all of them and delivered them to the scientist's fish tank in the centre of Great Bay, they hatch into the very same musical symbols we've seen before with the Parella. Whether or not these two species are a direct part of the evolutionary line of the Zora does remain to be answered and likely never will be, But it would seem as if there are certainly a few links between the two races that will tie them together in Zelda lore forever.
Castle Courtyard Windows. Zelda's Courtyard is an area in The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time where you first speak with Zelda, but if you take a break from smashing every single pot in existence, you'll find some very missable Easter eggs in this area. If you look through the eastern window, you'll find portraits related to Super Mario Bros. Depending on which version of the game you have. On the Nintendo 64, you'll see portraits of Yoshi, Peach, Mario, Bowser, and Luigi, while on the 3DS version you'll see scenery from New Super Mario Bros. Detaching the camera, we can see all of these images in their compressed glory. Shooting these portraits with a slingshot will reward the player with a couple of rupees. The lesser known Easter egg of the two is triggered when hitting the western window with the slingshot. This will cause a guard to throw a bomb into the courtyard after scolding Link. Which makes me think, so okay, if he knows we're here, and why doesn't he take us out? And if he doesn't know we're trespassing, does he just always throw explosives at Princess Zelda when she's being a little bit noisy? Either way, this man's putting Princess Zelda in danger. Originally, I kind of made a joke with Rauru that this guy was working for Ganondorf, but then I noticed that another NPC actually mentions trying to stop quote-unquote Ganondorf's men from chasing after Zelda and Impa as they escape. But we never see anyone with Ganondorf during his time at the castle or throughout the game. Sure, we know that he has summoned and resurrected some very powerful allies, but the wording kind of implies ground troops, like soldiers fighting with Ganondorf. So I present to you this. What if Ganondorf had a rat on the inside? Maybe even a few guards that he had turned to his side in one way or another. Promises of money? Promises of power? But that's a little bit outside the scope of this section, so why don't you just go ahead and look at them funny Mario pictures instead.
Tingle and Twilight Princess, Skyward Sword, Phantom Hourglass, and Spirit Tracks. Tingle, best known for being 35, having a passion for fairies and rupees, as well as having 3 brothers, including an adopted one, is one of the most recognizable characters in the Zelda series. Most people know him from his debut appearance in Majora's Mask, or for his, let's say, infamous quest in The Wind Waker. But he's also appeared in the Minish Cap, and the more hardcore fans of the series know about his appearances in Oracle of Ages, as well as Four Swords Adventures. However, Tingle has appeared in the form of references in 4 more official Zelda games, being the 4 I listed to introduce this section of the video. First, Parella, the owner of the Star game in Twilight Princess, is a clear reference to him, with his green garb and his cloak looking a lot like the one he wears in The Wind Waker. The series director Eiji Aonuma himself has also stated that Parella is a representation of what Tingle would be like if he were a realistic character, so yeah, you can't make it more official than that. Tingle is also seen as a knitted plushie in Zelda's room in Skyward Sword, a detail that would flip the entire timeline on its head if you think about it too hard, but whatever. And he's also seen in Spirit Tracks in 3 different places. There's a statue of him in the Castletown shop, as well as in the Linebeck trading station, and he is seen on a poster in Ferris's home at the Wellspring station. Last but definitely not least, he's seen on a wanted poster in the Milk Bar in Phantom Hourglass. What in the world did you do this time, Tingle? I knew he couldn't be trusted, and now we have proof of it in whatever the DS visual quality is supposed to be. It's probably meant to be a nod to the fact that Link frees him from jail in The Wind Waker. Now that you're aware of this, be on the lookout from here on out. You never know when Nintendo will reference this guy in future games.
Twilight Princess's Wii version is mirrored. Naturally, this refers to the fact that in the Wii version of Twilight Princess, the world map is in fact mirrored. This was in part inspired by the fact that Link holds the Master Sword in opposite hands in each version as well. The GameCube sees the hero of Twilight hold his sword in the traditional left-hand grip. For the Wii version though, it was moved to his right hand. The game had motion-controlled gameplay, and they wanted the sword to match up with the average person's dominant hand. To complement this change, the world map itself was flipped as well, so you'll turn right in the Wii version, whereas you would have turned left in the GameCube version. This was done because it was easier to simply mirror the entire game than to just mirror Link's model and individually change everything else. Flipping Link has a surprisingly large impact in ways you wouldn't have thought about. Even something as small as opening a door has to be accounted for. Then you have things like enemy pathing that need to be accounted for. So at a certain point, it was clear that just mirroring the entire thing was the way to go. And so, they did.
The Zora to Rito evolution. In The Wind Waker, we were introduced to a new species, the Rito, a bird-like race living on Dragon Roost Island. Everything seems pretty normal, until we meet Laruto, the spirit of the Earth Sage. She's a Zora, and notably, the only one of her fish-like race to appear in the game. We learn that Laruto was killed by Ganondorf, and Link must find her successor to restore the Master Sword. We go on to find out that the new sage is the Rito girl Medley, and that she's Laruto's descendant. This connection confirms that the Rito evolved from the Zora. But wait, how did we get from fish people to bird people? There are a variety of theories. The Zelda Encyclopedia states that the Zora couldn't survive the, quote, ethereal waters of the Great Flood, forcing them to evolve. But wouldn't a world covered in water be perfect for an aquatic species? Perhaps the water conditions were not habitable. While we know that there are both freshwater and saltwater Zora, the ones we specifically see in Ocarina of Time lived in freshwater areas like rivers and lakes. So, if the Great Sea is saltwater, it would make sense why those particular Zora couldn't adapt. In the distant future of the Wilds era, the Great Sea has dried up, and we see both Zora and Rito living in the same land. Presumably, the Zora we see here never evolved, possibly because they were descended from a saltwater group that survived the flood. The Rito, on the other hand, seem fully transformed into birds at this point, whereas their Wind Waker counterparts seem to be mid-evolution. Those Rito actually weren't born with wings. They received them only after a ritual involving Velu, the sky spirit of Dragon Roost. This suggests that Rito evolution wasn't just biological, but also magical. In short, the Zora and Rito appear to be an example of divergent evolution. For whatever reason, some Zoras adapted to post-flood conditions and remained aquatic, while others, unable to survive in the new seas, took to the land and had a magical assist from the spirits to accelerate their evolution from sea creatures to creatures of the skies. Their transformation shows how environmental and magical factors shaped the races of Hyrule over time.
The new Legend of Zelda. This is very much one of those Iceberg entries that leaves me wishing I could have gotten a hold of the Iceberg creator to see exactly what they meant here. In the meantime, all I can offer is my best guess. And my best guess is that this is in reference to this tweet from Nintendo of America. The new Legend of Zelda is what Breath of the Wild was referred to by Nintendo before we got the official name. As fans, we of course referred to it as Legend of Zelda Wii U, Zelda Wii U, and even sometimes just Zelda U, but Nintendo on numerous occasions referred to it as the new Legend of Zelda. This tweet was famous because it was actually the announcement that the game was going to be delayed out of 2016 and into 2017 for the sake of being released on the Wii U and the NX, which eventually became the Switch at the same time. This was a time of sadness for everybody, but in the long run, it was the right decision. It's kind of funny actually, Breath of the Wild began life as a Wii U exclusive, and many people were genuinely annoyed that Nintendo was forcing the game onto their new console, and delaying it specifically for the sake of doing so. But now I think most of us think of Breath of the Wild specifically as a Nintendo Switch game, and see the Wii U version as sort of the extra. Looks like Nintendo knew what they were doing after all.
Zola, Ganon, etc. There are quite a few examples of alternate or wrong spellings of the names of things like enemies, races, and characters in the Zelda franchise throughout things such as manuals, game files, and even in the actual games themselves. So let's talk about them and show all of the examples that I was able to find. The first example for today, and the most widely known example of an alternate spelling, is Ganon's name. The correct and now universally utilized spelling of the Demon King's name is obviously Ganon, spelled G-A-N-O-N, but in a couple select places it's actually spelled G-A-N-N-O-N. In Japanese media, the only time the spelling is used is in the game over screen of Zelda 2, but otherwise it's always been spelled with just one N in the middle of the name in Japanese games and any other Japanese media. However, in northern translations, Ganon is spelled with two N's in the middle in Zelda 1, but that's the only time said spelling is used in any northern media. This is something a lot of people get tripped up on, thinking that Ganon's name is spelled differently in early Zelda manuals too, but this actually isn't the case. The northern spelling error is likely just a result of bad translation, but I have no idea why it's spelled with 2 middle N's in the Zelda 2 Japanese game over screen. These next two also come from Zelda 1, so let's just group them together due to how similar they are. First, we have the misspelling of Moblin in the English manual for the original Zelda, and then we also have the misspelling of Zora from the same source. Moblin is spelled M-O-L-B-L-I-N here, and Zora is spelled Z-O-L-A here. Both of these are just due to what you'd expect. Bad translation. The replacement of the R with an L in Zora is a result of the confusion lots of Japanese to English translators have with the letters R and L, and the extra L in Moblin to turn it into Moblin is simply just an error in translation. The Zora translation error is actually still used in fandoms, as fans sometimes differentiate the passive and aggressive Zora by calling the aggressive ones Zola and the passive ones Zora. In the Japanese version of the original game, Darknuts are also called Tarknucks instead for some reason, and the Manhandla, aka the boss from Dungeon 3, is called a Testy Tart. I can't really decide which name is funnier. Lastly, we have a couple of examples of alternate namings from a more recent Zelda game, Majora's Mask. Normally, the notorious and annoying owl from both N64 Zelda games, Gaepora, is usually referred to as the name I just mentioned. However, two official Majora's Mask guides, specifically the Official Perfect Guide by Versus Books and Prima Official Game Guide by Prima Games, call him Capola Gabola instead. This is likely due to the fact that this is closer to how his name is directly translated from Japanese, but it's not exact, so I'm not entirely sure if that's the case. Majora's Mask also misspells Wizrobe, spelling it with 1 Z rather than 2. Weird. And that covers all the alternate or wrong spellings for Zelda.
The Hylian Loach. The Hylian Loach is the catch every angler across Hyrule dreams of. First seen in Ocarina of Time, the famous Loach can occasionally be found at the fishing pond beside Lake Hylia. It only appears every 4th time Link pays to fish here. However, there's no guarantee the Hylian Loach will be present. During the child era, 2 Hylian Loach will spawn in. However, during the adult era of the game, just one of the fish spawn in. Link's age also determines the weight and the spot the Loach will swim around, as well as if he can make use of the helpful sinking lure. Catching the Hylian Loach results in the man who runs the pond letting out a very enthusiastic reaction, celebrating the hero's rare catch. The Hylian Loach also appears in Twilight Princess, a game that takes place somewhere in the region of 100 years after Ocarina of Time. Even in this time frame, the Hylian Loach is still viewed as a rare catch. However now, the fish can be found in several locations: the Sacred Grove, the Lanayru Spring, the Graveyard, and Henna's Fishing Hole, the latter of which is home to the larger loaches in the kingdom. Henna's Fishing Hole is essentially the new fishing pond, only there's a little more to it. For starters, there's a unique 4-season cycle that changes whenever Link walks in. This means certain fish appear in certain conditions. The Hylian Loach will only appear during the summer cycle. It's not required to catch one, but owning the frog or sinking lure can help massively. A good tip for catching the Loach here is that one often likes to hide under the lily pads up the back corner of the pond. Much like the man who ran the pond in Ocarina of Time, Henna will also react with enthusiasm and passion if Link reels a Hylian Loach in, going as far to dub him the Fishmaster, along with framing a picture of Link's catch on her wall. One further piece of information on the Loach of Zelda is that in Majora's Mask we can find a Termina counterpart to the Hylian Loach, the Termina Loach. Although in this adventure, the Termina Loach is a more common fish that can be found in the Swamp Fishing Hole.
Wind Waker's rushed development, Triforce Quest, Lost Dungeons, and Public Apology. The Wind Waker has a lineup of 7 dungeons you need to beat to finish the game, but that was not always the plan. Believe it or not, there were supposed to be 2 more dungeons to that lineup, bringing the total number to 9, the same as the first 3D Zelda, as well as the first Zelda ever. However, somewhere in development, due to having to release the game quickly because of how low the GameCube sales were in its first year, the final 2 dungeons ended up being scrapped, and they were replaced by one of the most famous part of the series for all the wrong reasons, the Triforce quest. This mandatory quest made you find 8 Triforce charts, each leading to a different shard of the Triforce of Courage. Once the Triforce was complete, you would then be granted access to Hyrule again, as well as the final dungeon. Most of the quest felt exactly like it was, padding. Ask any Zelda fan their thoughts on it and you'll get the same words almost every time. Boring, repetitive, grindy, etc. Funnily enough, Nintendo seems to agree with the fanbase in hindsight. In a 2005 interview for Eurogamer regarding the then upcoming 3D game Twilight Princess, Eiji Aonuma, the director of The Wind Waker, apologized for how slow and dull the Triforce hunt was, and also for the low number of dungeons. You know things are bad when the director himself publicly apologizes for his game, it's not a very common thing. 10 years later though, Nintendo would release the HD version of The Wind Waker with several changes to make sure that the quest wasn't as long to complete, like giving you a faster way to travel, replacing over half the charts with the shards directly, and so on. Unfortunately, the 2 missing dungeons were never added to the HD version, and as of today, nobody knows what really happened to them. It's pretty reasonable, however, to think that one of them was supposed to be where Great Fish Isle is situated. For context, the first half of The Wind Waker has you collect 3 different pearls. The first 2 are at the end of dungeons, as expected, but the third one is pretty much just given to you. Not only is there no dungeon to go through, you're also told that you arrived to Great Fish Isle too late, and the place is almost completely destroyed. This has always felt odd to Zelda players, and would more than likely indicate that a dungeon was originally supposed to be there. Probably a water-themed one too, to fit the traditional forest fire water lineup. Some people have theorized that they were supposed to be the 2 mini dungeons of the second half of the game, with the power bracelets and iron boots you find in those being their respective dungeon item. Others think they were put into Twilight Princess, but nobody outside of Nintendo truly knows.
Official Nintendo Insider Forums. This one is very sentimental for me. The official Nintendo Insider Forums initially started off as an extension of Nintendo's gaming magazine, Nintendo Power. Insider was a very frequently used term in the magazines. The Insider Forums served as the official Nintendo message boards or forums for fans to flock to as they discussed the franchises that they loved so much. From the get-go, the Insider Forums had a distinctly Zelda flair, as they were created from a prior bulletin board called Hyrule Town Square that was created alongside the release of Wind Waker. These were official forums, but a little less directly overseen by Nintendo. From the ashes of Hyrule Town Square came the Nintendo Insider Forums. The original board was extremely simple. It didn't have the pages and pages of forum categories that would come to define so many message boards in the era. There was the Nintendo Power section where you could talk about general gaming, places to talk about the GameCube or Game Boy Advance, which were the current consoles at the time, a place to talk about older consoles, and a place to talk about individual franchises like Metroid, Pokemon, and The Legend of Zelda. The Nintendo Insider Forums would make many changes over the years and would eventually shut down in 2007, much to the heartbreak of the extremely active fan base. It was not a barely active site being put down behind a shed, it was a bustling community that was terminated while still actively in use. In that way, it reminds me a lot of the shutdown of Miiverse. I'm guessing the reason why the Insider Forums are on this iceberg is not merely because of how core the Zelda series is to the identity of the forums, from their origins as Hyrule Town Square to the fact that the leaders in the community were referred to as sages. It's also because of the importance that the Insider Forums held in the history of the Zelda community, particularly the theory space. Don't get me wrong, Zelda theorizing certainly did not begin with the Insider Forums, and there were other historic forums like Zelda Dungeon, which ran in parallel with Insider, on which just as much if not more theorizing and community building was happening. But make no mistake, a ton of theories were born on the Insider Forums, and it was an important place to consider when thinking about the history of the Zelda community. The Zelda boards were host to a lot of the same stuff that has continued on to this day, from heated pre-Hyrule Historia timeline debates, to arguing about whether Link ends up with Malon or Zelda, endless arguments over whether the next game's art style or game direction shows that the Zelda franchise is ruined, you name it. Step into the Insider forums in 2003 and everything would look very different from the modern Zelda fandom, and yet a lot would also look the exact same. For me, the Insider forums are sentimental because they were where I spent my formative years as a teenager who spent all of his free time online. I was a huge message boards guy, and the Nintendo Insider forums were my absolute favorite. They were where I found community for the first time. This channel would not exist without the Insider forums. I was heartbroken when the shutdown happened, and I never really found that sense of community again until I started this channel, which led to me meeting a lot of other fantastic Zelda creators, many of whom have become good personal friends, and of course I've gotten to know you folks. Anyways, sorry about a little bit of mid-video sappiness. Suffice it to say that the Nintendo Insider forums were a fundamental part of the history of the Zelda community.
Link talks in most games, the player just doesn't hear them. Link being famously mute is a trivia point a lot of people take for granted, and sure, Link is famously meant to be a stand-in for the player, sometimes at the expense of his own character development. But since especially the evolution of the 3D Zelda games, not only has Link become more developed as a character, but he has even been known to speak. Maybe it's not coming from a traditional dialogue box, but it is speaking nonetheless. The first example are moments of implied speech, where Link talks but the player doesn't hear him. For instance, in Twilight Princess, there's a cutscene where Link returns to Orden Village to consult with the mayor for advice for his journey ahead. Earlier in the story, the village children of Orden have been kidnapped by monsters, but Link has since seen them take refuge in Kakariko Village. Inside the mayor's house, the conversation begins with the mayor telling Link, "I see, so the youngins are in Kakariko Village," implying that Link had just spoken this information. Later in the scene, the mayor says, "What I should be asking is how I can help out." To which Link replies with a simple nod, but the mayor replies, "What's that now? The Gorons of Death Mountain? I see, so Ronaldo told you that." In a scene like this, the characters are clearly responding to Link, even though he doesn't give any dialogue that the player can read. Other examples are moments where Link actually does use dialogue boxes. He's never given a full dialogue box, but he is sometimes given a couple of dialogue options you can choose when prompted by an NPC. These are more prevalent in Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom. For instance, in Breath of the Wild, you can rent a sand seal to ride in Gerudo Town. When approaching Calm, and she asks if you're interested in renting one of the seals, you can respond, "Let's seal the deal. How do I set seal?" Or, "See you later." This helps paint a picture not of a silent and serious knight, but of someone lighthearted and punny. And Breath of the Wild is full of moments like these, where Link has the option to respond, and show a lot of personality too. The third kind of examples of Link talking are in moments where he actually gets proper voice acting. Sure, there's something like the Zelda cartoon from the 80s where every episode is full of him making his signature quip, "Excuse me, princess."
Nice job, hero.
Hey, excuse me, princess.
A style carried over into the CDI cutscenes as well.
I wonder what's for dinner.
Oh boy, I'm so hungry I could eat an Octorok.
But even in official releases, there's a couple proper examples of Link being voice acted too. For instance, in The Wind Waker, when either in the Tower of Gods or in the 2 Sage dungeons at the end of the game, you can press R to call either statues you can control or the 2 sages accompanying you in those later dungeons. Calling them makes Link verbally call out, "Come on!" It's a small example, but undeniably 2 clear English words. As a side note, Link also verbally meows in The Wind Waker when hiding from Mila at night. But that's a different story.
Typically, video game leaks happen once a game hits retail, or is at least passed along to reviewers and critics. That's because accessing the game before then is out of the question for most of the public, with even Nintendo's own staff usually kept well away from the files. But for a while in 2016, it seems like that could have changed. Why? Because as revealed on social media, a group of hackers tried to steal the E3 demo for Breath of the Wild from its stand, with their intended method being to install homebrew software on the stand and send the files over the internet. It was a daring ploy, and one which nearly worked. The custom firmware set up, the tools needed were created for demo hardware, and at first it looked like the devious plan could have worked. Unfortunately, reality put a stop to those plans. The event ended up overbooked on the last day, and hackers couldn't access the demo unit to finish the job. So yeah, they got quite close, but it seems fate wasn't going to make it quite that easy.
Link is unironically an elf. This is another one of those entries where I wish I could have gotten a hold of the Iceberg creator to confirm I have any idea of what they're talking about here, but we're gonna do our best. Comparisons between Link and elves has existed for as long as his pointy ears have been shown in the concept art for the very first game, and only got more intense as the Lord of the Rings movies came out and another blonde, pointy-eared warrior often depicted with a bow began to become popular. Link was designed with pointy ears as a way to make his sprite stand out a bit more in the first game for the NES, and eventually pointy ears became a defining feature for the Hylians, the race to which Link belongs. Their ears are pointy to allow them to hear the goddesses, as they say. Hylians are not elves though, and in fact, whereas elves are generally depicted as being a race that lives in forests or other hidden places, Hylians are portrayed as being the urban, settled power of Hyrule, whereas it is the other races that tend to be hidden away. If any race is closer to elves, I would say it's the Kokiri. We obviously know that Link's appearance is heavily based on Peter Pan, and funnily enough, there are also heated debates in the fandom, I guess, about Peter Pan not actually being an elf despite clearly being inspired by one. If you want to learn more about the origin of Link's elf-like appearance, I've linked a Did You Know Gaming video on the very topic in the pinned comment. However, I'm still at a loss by what the Iceberg meant by Link is unironically an elf. Perhaps they're referring to how elf-like the hero of time is. He has pointed ears, lives in the woods, talks to the trees, and makes friends with the forest fairies. That's about as elf-like as it gets, and that's my best possible guess. But the word unironically implies that something is literally true, and in regards to Link being an elf, we simply don't have confirmation of that.
Hyrule Historia isn't canon. Ah, the Zelda books. Where do we start? Of all the many items on the iceberg, this might be the most controversial. This is a massive topic, one that has been dissected and debated ad nauseum since Hyrule Historia was first released in Japan in 2011. There have been countless YouTube videos, Reddit posts, Discord arguments, and just general internet discourse picking apart every facet of Hyrule Historia and its successors, Encyclopedia, Art and Artifacts, and the Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom Masterworks books. These books were intended to be compendiums to the Legend of Zelda series. Hyrule Historia itself was created to celebrate the franchise's 25th anniversary and serves as a historical archive of the beloved franchise. The book contains tons of never-before-seen sketches, character art, world-building designs from across the franchise, and deep dives into Hyrule's mythology. Because the book was released around the same time as Skyward Sword, a big chunk is also dedicated to that game. Oh yeah, and it also includes the quote-unquote official timeline of the Zelda series. The book is riddled with oddities and errors. Some of these are rather harmless, like them contracting Gaepora and Rauru's name into Karu on page 87 in the English edition. Some are way more embarrassing, like them erroneously swapping the fire and spirit medallions associated with the awakened sages of Ocarina of Time on page 89. But some of them, in the eyes of certain Zelda fans, are unforgivable blasphemy, like the suggestion on page 118 that the hero Shade from Twilight Princess lamented the fact that he wasn't remembered as a hero, or the fact that the book places Four Swords adventures in the child timeline after Twilight Princess, despite page 235 admitting that it's a sequel to Four Swords, a game which it places on the unified timeline before Ocarina of Time. How can there be 3 games between the 2 Four Sword games on the timeline if one of them is a sequel to the other? And speaking of the timeline, I saved the best, or is it worse, for last. Page 69 of the book changed the Legend of Zelda series forever. It is the single most debated topic in the fandom to this day, despite being published almost 15 years ago. The controversy has to do with how the timeline splits. After Ocarina of Time, due to the time-traveling mechanics of that game, the timeline splits into 3 sections: the adult timeline, the child timeline, and the downfall timeline. It's that last one that has everyone in a tizzy busy. Its origin point is a hypothetical scenario where Link loses the battle with Ganon at the end of Ocarina of Time, allowing the Demon King to obtain all 3 pieces of the Triforce. This forces the sages to seal him in the Sacred Realm with the complete Triforce, thus setting up the scenario for a link to the past. To put it lightly, people absolutely hate this plot twist, and it's easy to see why, because this attempt to string the games together in this way can be interpreted as wholly made up by the authors of the book. But Nintendo approved this timeline, right? I mean, Nintendo has subsequently included it on their websites, promotional materials, and in the follow-up Zelda book Encyclopedia. There are solid arguments on both sides of the debate of whether Hyrule Historia is canon, and ultimately, I think it comes down to personal preference. Since the Iceberg is saying Hyrule Historia isn't canon, I'm going to assume this isn't sarcasm and that the author of the Iceberg literally believes it isn't canon. When you talk to people online who are also in this camp, they will often quote the aforementioned errors in the book as proof, but there are some even more compelling reasons to reject the books. And here are some hand-selected ones which I believe make the case that Hyrule Historia is, in fact, not canon. First, Nintendo outsourced the creation of these books to third parties like Shogakukan for the Japanese edition and Dark Horse Comics for the English edition. A quick look at the book's credits confirms this, as it notably lacks the names of Nintendo's own staff. There have also been interviews where Zelda producer Aonuma has distanced himself from the books, like this 2013 Mashable interview where he said, quote, "When we were exploring ways to make fans happy, we created the Hyrule Historia that summarizes all the games and the story so far. I didn't edit it myself, but tons of people who worked on it were fans of the games themselves." And then there are some disclosures in the books themselves which detractors have taken to mean that the writers of the books took far too many creative liberties when presenting the timeline, like this quote on page 68 of Hyrule Historia, the page right before the timeline, where it talks about the fluidity of the timeline and how it could change in the future if new evidence is found. It says, "This chronicle merely collects information that is believed to be true at this time, and there are many obscured and unanswered secrets that still lie within the tale. As the stories and storytellers of Hyrule change, so too does its history. Hyrule's history is a continuously woven tapestry of events. Changes that seem inconsequential, disregarded without even a shrug, could evolve at some point to hatch new legends and, perhaps, change this tapestry of history itself." And finally, Encyclopedia seems to reinforce this idea on page 8 in a preface to the section that presents the most up-to-date timeline at that time. Where necessary, the writers of this book added their own interpretations and expanded upon the game's stories. It should be noted that the events described here are also subject to revision, as new trials may await the people of Hyrule in ages to come. And there you have it. Those are the major arguments against the canonicity of Hyrule Historia. There are obviously plenty of counter-arguments, which if you're interested in learning more, I would recommend Monster Maze's 40-minute deep dive into this debate. I told you this was a massive topic. I really just scratched the surface here, and I'm sure the comments section will peacefully educate all of us.
Retro Studios Zelda game. Retro Studios is the famed developer behind the iconic Metroid Prime and Donkey Kong Country Returns series, but in the mid-2000s, Retro were creating concepts for a Master Sword origin story. In 2020, Sammy Hall, a pre-production artist at Retro, shared concept art of a cancelled Zelda project that followed the story of the last remaining member of the Sheikah tribe. This game would have revolved around this Sheikah's journey to become the Master Sword and a conflict with a Dark Gerudo tribe that's preparing for Ganon's birth. The development of this game happened long before the official Zelda timeline was created and allegedly would have taken place in the Downfall timeline, creating a completely different Zelda timeline as we know it. Retro Zelda was heavily inspired by the dark aesthetics of Twilight Princess, but also blended in elements from games like Wind Waker as well. One of the more notable pieces of concept art to come from this is an image of what appears to be a new race of dragonoid people that's heavily inspired by Velu. Other artwork shows off heavily stylized environments and creatures, as well as their take on B-Scan. While this game never got past the pre-production stage, elements of it would be used in a later Zelda title, Skyward Sword, a game that revolves heavily around the creation of the Master Sword. The dark imagery of the concept art definitely screams Metroid Prime, but used in a Zelda setting gave us a look at what could have been an extremely interesting take on the series.
Deku has two canonical pronunciations. These adorable little guys are one of my favorite races in Ocarina of Time, and it is a delight to be able to play as one in Majora's Mask and Cadence of Hyrule. But how do you actually pronounce their name? Deku? 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 What's the correct canonical pronunciation? Well, as the title may have given away, there are two answers. Zelda pronunciation is a tricky topic because the overwhelming majority of games were released before the series introduced voice acting with Breath of the Wild, so a lot of it was done with guesswork in reference to the Japanese syllables. With these guys, we have confirmation. We have basically two different canonical pronunciations, Deku and Deku. Now, Deku is almost certainly the most canonical pronunciation. We've heard it pronounced that way on a number of different occasions. The first is by the Deku tree himself in Breath of the Wild, who refers to himself as Deku.
I have watched over Hyrule since time immemorial. Many have referred to me over the ages as the Deku tree.
Later, we have another instance via Princess Zelda, voiced by Patricia Summerset in Age of Calamity, where she says, Deku.
Great Deku tree.
In Tears of the Kingdom, we have Princess Zelda once again referring to him as Deku.
Great Deku tree. Thank you so much.
Additionally, we have another quite obscure example of Deku from a whopping 12 years ago, with the Wii U launch title Nintendo Land. The robotic guide Monita says the word in reference to the Zelda-themed Battle Quest minigame, and she says Deku.
Deku tree.
However, we do have one instance of an alternate pronunciation, and it comes from Breath of the Wild, where Princess Zelda, as voiced by Patricia Summerset, says Deku, like daytime, Deku.
I sense there is great strength in your dedication.
Great Deku tree. I ask of you, when he returns, can you please relay this message?
So we have two different canonical pronunciations of Deku by Princess Zelda, Deku and Deku. I know there is generally going to be an argument that we should disregard the pronunciation in Breath of the Wild and chalk it up to Patricia Summerset just having inconsistent pronunciation, but the fact is that pronunciation had to get through a voice director, and it would have been approved by Nintendo directly. So both pronunciations seem to be right. You say Deku, I say Deku. All we know for sure is that Deku is completely wrong, you monsters.
The towns in Adventure of Link that are named after the sages. In Zelda 2, the Adventure of Link towns serve as crucial support for Link, offering healing, spell learning, and also guidance. Uniquely, the towns in the game were later repurposed as the names of sages in the Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time, with Aonuma stating he wanted to create a rich, retroactive connection in the Zelda timeline. Though Zelda 2 predates Ocarina of Time by over a decade, this naming convention adds a sense of continuity and also hidden lore to the Zelda franchise. So 5 of the sages from Ocarina of Time share the name of a town in the Adventure of Link. So we've got Rauru, Saria, Rito, Darunia, and also Nabooru. Well, the first town that Link encounters is Rauru, and that is where he learns his first magic spell, and that is the shield. So it serves as an introduction to the player of Zelda 2 The Adventure of Link to the town system, and also it reflects stability and safety as well. In Ocarina of Time, Rauru is the Sage of Light, and also the first sage to greet Link in the Chamber of Sages, echoing the town's foundational role in Zelda 2. Well, Saria is a village in Zelda 2 requiring a little bit of exploration to find, and that does line up with their counterpart in Ocarina of Time. Saria, the Sage of the Forest, and also Link's childhood friend, is residing in a secluded woodland. It's also worth noting that there is a town in Adventure of Link called Mido, and we do know that Mido is definitely not a sage in Ocarina of Time. That would be quite strange. But this is quite interesting because maybe Nintendo changed their mind somewhere along the line. Moving on, Rito is a town in Zelda 2 known for its tranquil layout and also its helpful citizens. And then in Ocarina of Time, Princess Rito becomes the Sage of Water and also the ruler of the Zora people. Rito Town is also where Link meets the famous Error character. Darunia is a mountain town in Zelda 2, where Link gains powerful spells and techniques as well, and in Ocarina of Time, Darunia is the proud Goron leader, the Sage of Fire, and also a fitting match for the rugged, elevated setting of his namesake town. Nabooru Town is next, so in the Adventure of Link, it's located in eastern Hyrule, and in Ocarina of Time the name is used again for the Gerudo warrior, who becomes the Sage of Spirit. Altogether, the reuse of the town names from Zelda 2 as sages in Ocarina of Time, it's a thoughtful act of retroactive storytelling. It deepened the mythology of the series, gave old names new meaning, and provided fans with a rewarding sense of cohesion across the timeline. Also, if you think about the timeline, it does make perfect sense. According to the timeline, Ocarina of Time came first in the timeline, and as the years and the centuries passed, you can imagine the people in Zelda 2, The Adventure of Link, maybe they wanted to name their towns after these famous sages. Although that is not specifically stated anywhere, that is a nice working theory going around the Zelda community.
Seasonal changes in Twilight Princess. Throughout the entirety of the Zelda series, there is only one specific location that has seasonal changes. The fishing hole seen in Twilight Princess can be cycled through 4 seasons by leaving and re-entering the area. It has spring, summer, fall, and winter. This is not only an aesthetic change, but the type of fish you can catch is affected by which season you're currently in. Some fish can only be caught during certain seasons. For example, the famous Hylian Loach can only be caught during the summer cycle. This makes the fishing hole unique. However, it isn't actually the only instance of seasonal changes. Whilst it is the only specific set location to feature this, in The Legend of Zelda Oracle of Seasons, we experience seasonal changes across the entire map. This is caused by using the game's main mechanical item, the Rod of Seasons, a magical rod that allows Link to control the seasons, making the fishing hole in Twilight Princess and the entirety of Oracle of Seasons the only 2 instances of functional seasons in the Legend of Zelda series.
Goro. Upon reading this, your mind probably immediately goes to Yunobo. Yunobo says Goro at the end of most sentences, and he basically treats it like his catchphrase.
I am the Sage of Fire! I've got an awesome new power, Goro!
This refers to a sound uttered by the Gorons. Goro serves as somewhat of a multi-purpose word. It's often used as a friendly way of addressing people, kind of serving the same role dude or bro does in modern times. But Gorons also sometimes just say it to let out emotions, or even just because. I know all of my fellow millennials are gonna hate this, but in that regard, Goro is actually pretty close to how younger people use bruh in the modern day. The Zelda Wiki speculates that the Goron name comes from the Japanese onomatopoeia Goro Goro, which is the sound of a rolling boulder. So rather than Goro coming from dropping the last letter off the name, Goron, rather it seems like Goron comes from adding an N onto the word Goro. Kinda neat.
Aonuma was recruited due to Marvelous, Mohitatsu no Takarajima. Marvelous no Hotatsu no Takarajima, or Marvelous Another Treasure Island, is a Japan-exclusive game released for the Super Famicom system in 1996. It was the first game directed by current Zelda producer Eiji Aonuma. While originally hired at Nintendo because of his mechanical doll making, Eiji Aonuma eventually began playing video games for fun, and quickly grew fond of The Legend of Zelda: A Link to the Past. Aonuma then created Marvelous Another Treasure Island, using A Link to the Past both as inspiration and for its engine. The similarities are pretty easy to see. The game follows 3 boys, Dion, Max, and Jack, on their school trip to an island where the titular pirate treasure, Marvelous, is rumored to be buried. By switching between each character and using their unique abilities, the player solves puzzles and unlocks new areas. Marvelous never received a North American release, as Nintendo began shifting focus from the Super Famicom to the Nintendo 64. Similarly, because of his work on Marvelous, Shigeru Miyamoto recruited Aonuma to work on an upcoming title for the N64, a little game known as The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time, where he served as the game system director and dungeon designer, famously designing everyone's favorite dungeon, the Water Temple, among others. While Aonuma has been involved in every Zelda title since Ocarina of Time, Marvelous Another Treasure Island still has never been released outside of Japan, though a fan translation was released in 2016, and the 3DS game The Legend of Zelda Triforce Heroes, which also sees the player controlling 3 different Links, is considered to be Marvelous's spiritual successor.
Miyamoto considers Zelda 2 a failure. Zelda 2: The Adventure of Link is one of the more divisive entries in the series.
You can't beat your own shadow, and that's what this game is. It's your dark alter ego that knows more about you than you know yourself.
While some people regard it as the series' black sheep, others regard it as an underrated gem. However, there is a claim that The Adventure of Link is the one game that Shigeru Miyamoto himself considers to be a failure. You'll most often see this claim pushed by Zelda 2 haters to prove that it's a bad game. Hell, I even used it in my very first Zelda theory.
There's one Zelda game that Shigeru Miyamoto himself has gone on record as saying that he wishes they'd done more with it before the game released. And that game is Zelda 2: The Adventure of Link.
But does this claim have any truth to it? This claim was first pushed all the way back in 2003 in an interview with the magazine Superplay. When asked why Nintendo has never done another game like Zelda 2, Miyamoto responded by saying that Zelda 2 was made by a different team from the first game, and that the finished product was, quote, exactly what we expected. Because, quote, all games usually get better in the development process, since good ideas keep coming. But Zelda 2 was kind of a failure, end quote. This claim was then further pushed in a 2013 Kotaku article. The author, Stephen Totilo, was asking Shigeru Miyamoto some questions about the then upcoming Pikmin 3. Miyamoto had been discussing how proud he was of Pikmin 3, stating that he believed it to be one of the best games he'd worked on. This then led Stephen to ask if Miyamoto had ever felt like he had made a bad game. Miyamoto's response was a simple, yeah, before going more in depth about what he thought made Pikmin 3 so great. Of course, Stephen was curious, and he asked a bit later if Miyamoto could specify which game he thought was bad. Miyamoto responded, quote, I wouldn't say that I've ever made a bad game, per se, but a game I think we could have done more with was Zelda 2: The Adventure of Link, end quote. He went on to explain how most of Nintendo's games start with a plan that evolves throughout development, but with Zelda 2, quote, all we ended up creating was what we originally planned on paper, end quote. He followed this up by saying that Zelda 2's biggest challenge during development was the hardware limitations of the NES and Famicom systems. He said that, quote, if we had been able to have the switch between the scenes speed up, if that had been faster, we could have done more with how we use the side-scrolling versus the overhead view, and kind of the interchange between the two. But because of the limitations on how quickly those scenes changed, we weren't able to. He also added that it would have been nice to have bigger enemies in the game, and that while it's possible to do that in games now, it also takes far more effort to do so. So ultimately, while he may have once seen Zelda 2 as a genuine failure, Miyamoto now seems to look at it more as a missed opportunity. Miyamoto doesn't believe that Zelda 2 is a failure or a bad game, but rather he believes that they could have done a lot more with it had the limitations of the hardware not been such a restriction. Much like this Iceberg entry, the claim that Zelda 2 is a failure is really just hyperbole. But who knows? Maybe one day the Zelda team will return to Zelda 2 and give it another shot. Maybe then we won't die to literal f***ing bubbles.
The Legend of Zelda X. This is another entry I'm not 100% sure on, but I believe that this is referencing the number of collaborations that the Zelda franchise has done with other games. Collaborations between Japanese properties are often denoted with an X, like Street Fighter X Tekken. The Legend of Zelda in particular has been involved in a number of crossovers. We're not going to talk about basic cross-series cameos and references here, like Kirby in Link's Awakening or a sleeping Link in Super Mario RPG, but rather significant collaborations that feature actual elements from The Legend of Zelda being brought over to other games. There are two instances I can find in which the collaboration is explicitly referred to as blank X The Legend of Zelda or The Legend of Zelda X blank. The first one that immediately comes to mind is the DLC pack for Mario Kart 8. Fittingly titled Mario Kart 8 X The Legend of Zelda. This features Link as a playable racer, as well as a track taking place in Hyrule, and a number of Zelda-inspired kart parts, including a motorcycle that would eventually inspire Breath of the Wild's Master Cycle. Second is the frequent collaboration between The Legend of Zelda and the Capcom series Monster Hunter. The first collaboration was The Legend of Zelda X Monster Hunter 4, which featured some Link-inspired sword and shield weapons, as well as a bow, and an outfit to look like Link. The collaboration was run again in the re-release of the game in The Legend of Zelda X Monster Hunter 4 Ultimate Collaboration. The companies would collaborate again for Legend of Zelda X Monster Hunter Generations, which would feature a Wind Waker-oriented outfit and weapon pack, and again for that re-release in The Legend of Zelda X Monster Hunter Generations Ultimate, featuring a focus on Breath of the Wild as well as content from the previous collabs. There are many collaborations that are not explicitly referred to with an X day notation, and we'll talk about a few of them, though certainly not all of them. The most long-running collaboration comes from the Animal Crossing series, which has a significant amount of crossover with The Legend of Zelda. Ever since the first game in the series, Animal Crossing featured Zelda-based furniture, such as the Triforce and Master Sword, as well as outfits and hats from the series, but things took a dramatic turn in Animal Crossing New Leaf's content update, Welcome Amiibo. This update saw not only an absolute ton of new Zelda items added, but also went a step further and introduced 4 Zelda characters as new villagers that you can invite to your village. Wolf Link, Pig Ganon, Medley, and Epona can be befriended and become members of your community if you'd like them to, which is wild. If you want a comprehensive look at every single instance of collaboration between Animal Crossing and The Legend of Zelda, I actually did a video on exactly that topic, which you can find linked in the description. The franchise Soul Calibur has a long history of guest characters from different franchises, and they often have a different character for each console release. Soul Calibur 2 started this trend, with the comic book character Spawn appearing on the Xbox release, Tekken's Heihachi on the PS2 release, and our very own Link showing up on the GameCube release. He has a moveset based on his Ocarina of Time appearance, and has a roster of iconic weapons from across the series. Sonic Lost World for the Wii U has a really interesting piece of downloadable content, which allows Sonic to run through a level based on The Legend of Zelda, called The Legend of Zelda Zone. He runs top speed through Hyrule, and even runs into Link riding his Loftwing at one point. A Link costume is wearable in the Bayonetta re-release for the Nintendo Switch, and Zelda armor and weaponry from Breath of the Wild can be found in the Switch release of The Elder Scrolls V Skyrim. Here's a random one. Phantasy Star Zero for the Nintendo DS is licensed by Nintendo and has an equipable Hyrule shield in it. And lastly, the indie game Cadence of Hyrule itself is advertised as sort of a Crypt of the Necrodancer X The Legend of Zelda experience. There are a ton of other instances of costumes and references appearing in other games, but this is a list of my favorites.
Mothula can be killed by a bee. Bees are something most players won't use during their playthrough of A Link to the Past, as most of the time they're far too weak and won't even work against any of the bosses. Well, every boss except for one. Despite nearly every single boss in the game being immune to bees, the Skullwoods dungeon boss Mothula can be damaged by bees just like every other enemy. This can actually be pretty helpful if you're anything like me and absolutely suck at this game. I cannot believe that a frickin' bee is better at A Link to the Past than I am. From my research, there doesn't seem to be an actual explanation for why this is the case. I had thought that maybe bees or wasps would hunt moths in real life, but that doesn't seem to be true. Again, we have no idea if this was intentional or just some bug in the code. See what I did there?
Fi in Breath of the Wild. The story of Skyward Sword is designed to be the story of the formation of the iconic Master Sword, from its starting point as the Goddess Sword, through the trials that the hero of the skies must endure, to tempering the blade with the sacred flames of the Golden Goddesses. However, in amongst this story came the subplot of Fi, your companion for the game and spirit that resides within the sword that you're destined to wield. The goddess, according to Fi, imbued the Goddess Sword with her spirit to help the hero, but this spirit seems to remain, not just throughout Skyward Sword, but much later on in the series. In Breath of the Wild, one of Zelda's memories is a harrowing moment where her gallant knight Link is defeated in battle by a guardian.
Link, save yourself. Go. I'll be fine. Don't worry about me. Run.
Its energy flies out towards the princess, and he steps in front of her, being her literal shield.
Was that the power? No. Link, get up. You're just fine.
But as she holds him in her arms, she spots a light blue hue pulsating from the blade of the Sword of Evil's Bane.
The sword. So he can still be saved.
She quickly forms a plan to send Link to the Shrine of Resurrection, and shortly after, she gives the instruction to the Sheikah to take him.
Take Link to the Shrine of Resurrection. If you don't get him there immediately, we are going to lose him forever. Is that clear? So make haste and go. His life is now in your hands.
This blue energy is synonymous with Fi, and is the same light that envelops the sword whenever Link performs a Skyward Strike. This, as well as a short exchange that Zelda has with the sword, where she seemingly uses its glow to confirm that Link is alive and can indeed be saved, has led players to believe that Fi still has a presence within the Master Sword, therefore making her debut in Breath of the Wild in this scene. Whether this is the case, or the sword speaks to Link's life energy as it were, as the two have a bond forged by the fact that the Master Sword is the sword bestowed upon the hero from the goddess, is another matter that remains somewhat contentious amongst fans to this day, and unfortunately, we'll likely never get a full answer from Nintendo on.
Triforce Trilogy. The Triforce Trilogy refers to what was once a planned trilogy of Zelda games for the Game Boy Color to be developed by Capcom. Interestingly, while Capcom would of course be known for the development of the Oracle games as well as Minish Cap, they were initially brought on for a remake of Zelda 1 of all things. Yoshiki Okamoto, who had recently served as executive producer and supervisor for a string of fantastic games, had been tasked to create some Zelda games. The plan was to first make a remake of the NES Zelda game for the Game Boy Color, after which the team would go on to develop some entirely new titles for the series. Problems arised quickly though, as parts of Okamoto's development team, called Flagship, wanted to skip the remake altogether and move on to an entirely new game. Development stalled and Okamoto went to Shigeru Miyamoto for help. Miyamoto gave them a simple guideline to follow. They were to develop 3 games, all using the same gameplay engine and graphics palette. 2 of them would be entirely original games, and 1 of them would be a remake of the very first Zelda game, although with an updated story that ties in with the other 2 games. The 3 games could be played in any order, and the playthrough would be altered depending on the order you'd played them in. These 3 titles had tentative English names: the Mystical Seed of Power, the Mystical Seed of Courage, and the Mystical Seed of Wisdom. Together, they were to make up the Triforce Trilogy. The 3rd title, Mystical Seed of Courage, ran into complications as the team struggled to adapt the sprawling world of the NES game to the tiny screen of the Game Boy, paired with the team's excitement to begin development of the original titles. Eventually, Mystical Seed of Courage was dropped, and the other 2 titles were renamed to Oracle of Ages and Oracle of Seasons, and the Triforce Trilogy became a Triforce Duology. You can still see remnants of that Zelda 1 remake though in the number of similarities that Oracle of Seasons shares with the very first game, and many of the mechanics of the cancelled Mystical Seed of Courage were worked into Oracle of Ages, such as the time travel.
This refers to how clipping inside the 9-knuckle model shows you a Gerudo one in Ocarina of Time and Majora's Mask. It's possible this was done to save resources for the Spirit Temple battle with the possessing the Boru, but it's also possible that all 9 knuckles went to lose armour and be revealed as Gerudo once defeated. Interestingly, the 3DS version keeps this detail, except with one difference. The head of the Gerudo model is missing if you clip inside the 9-knuckle one. It's likely this was done to save resources, but the implications also speak for themselves.
Cass's teacher. Did you know the title of one of the biggest video games of all time comes from the lyrics of a song? The flames crawl, the waters rise. The lightning strikes, the wind sighs. A beast beyond the divine four awaits a hero forevermore. Let not the sound leave horses riled. Breathe in the breath of the wild. These lyrics come from Cass, the Rito bard and traveling musician in The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild. Recognizable by his blue feathers and his signature bandoneon, Cass is dedicated to preserving Hyrule's ancient songs and history. He studied under a Sheikah court poet who had lived through the Great Calamity and passed down knowledge of Hyrule's forgotten past. Cass travels across Hyrule performing songs that contain clues to hidden shrines and historical events. These songs often reference the ancient hero, the champions, and the trials they faced before Ganon's return. Though Cass is a wandering minstrel, he is also a husband and a father of 5, with his family residing in Rito Village. His most significant role is connected to the Champions Ballad, an unfinished song written by his teacher before his death. This song recounts the trials and legacy of the 4 champions who piloted the divine beasts. Cass takes it upon himself to complete the ballad, following in his mentor's footsteps. Throughout the Champions Ballad quest, Cass accompanies Link, gradually piecing together the song. His performances reveal key memories and forgotten moments, helping Link reconnect with the lost champions and Hyrule's history. Through his music, Cass preserves the legacy of the champions, his teacher, and the hero who sealed Calamity Ganon. The Sheikah court poet who serves as Cass's teacher is shrouded in mystery, and over the years there have been many theories trying to identify them. Of the little information we have about him, we do know that he was around the same age as Princess Zelda. He accompanied her on her journeys across Hyrule to study ancient Sheikah relics, and over time he developed feelings for her. His love would go unrequited as he became aware that Princess Zelda ultimately gave her heart to Link, which was the key to unlocking her sealing power. Despite his resentment that Link was neither noble nor a royal and, in the poet's eyes, unworthy of Zelda's love, Cass's teacher ultimately committed his life to helping the hero of Hyrule. Theorists have speculated that he could have been anyone from a random unnamed Sheikah to an homage to longtime Zelda composer Koji Kondo, to the Sheikah researcher Robbie. Nintendo Black Crisis made a whole video on that last one, with one of the pieces of evidence being that Cherry, Robbie's ancient oven, was named after his first love, and that the Japanese name for the location where Zelda's powers awakened is Black Cherry. There's a lot more to this theory, and I think it holds up pretty well, but I'm pointing out this specific piece of evidence because, in my opinion, it is even more plausible after the additional lore we were given by the Zelda voice memories. Zelda says,
I have visited this place and the great Deku tree countless times, but the very first was shortly after I was born, when the great Deku tree blessed me with a cherry blossom bud. It bloomed above my head, proving I had inherited the power of the goddess. Though Father was joyful at this, Mother's reaction was mixed. There was difficulty and pain in the journey that lay ahead for me, but I am, in the end, happy to have been blessed with this power.
Edit Dungeon. Edit Dungeon refers to the origins of The Legend of Zelda Echoes of Wisdom, which originally began life as a sort of Legend of Zelda version of Mario Maker, which focused on allowing players to make their own dungeons. This idea was, of course, first experimented with in the remake of Link's Awakening, which came with the Dungeon Chamber mode, which allowed for the creation of your own dungeon using prefabricated rooms. It was a good idea, but playing a bunch of dungeons that are just the same rooms and different orders is not tremendously thrilling. So they decided to give a try to making a brand new game focused entirely around making dungeons for your friends to play through, almost identical to Mario Maker. These user-created dungeons would be called Edit Dungeons. They worked on this prototype for about a year before Aonuma upended the tea table, as he put it. Aonuma enjoyed the idea of making dungeons, but what he was truly compelled by was the act of placing objects in the dungeons and seeing how they behave. This ended up being an area he wanted to explore more, and eventually Aonuma made the declaration that the game would be a more traditional style Zelda game based around copying and pasting objects as opposed to a dungeon maker style game. I guess whether that's a good thing or a bad thing depends on you. A Zelda Maker would have been very cool, but would have mostly been a novelty and ultimately would have felt like a spin-off, whereas Echoes of Wisdom is an excellent addition to the mainline Zelda franchise. That being said, a Zelda Maker is still an idea I would love for them to revisit one day. Age of Calamity is canon. At this point, we all know the drama around Hyrule Warriors Age of Calamity, which I touched on in the Terraco entry in the last Iceberg. To make a long story short, Age of Calamity was advertised as a canon retelling of Breath of the Wild's Calamity, up until Terraco brought the champion's descendants back to the past and saved the day, firmly making Age of Calamity into a what-if, alternate ending storyline, and absolutely, obviously, non-canon. Right? See, the thing is, there's a group of people who offer the argument that Age of Calamity actually is canon. The argument isn't based around trying to prove that the descendants remember the events of Age of Calamity in Tears of the Kingdom, or showing that Terraco created a timeline loop, or anything like that. The argument is simply that Age of Calamity creates a fourth branch in the timeline. You see, this is how it goes. The idea is that when Terraco goes back in time, instead of simply returning to an earlier point in the same timeline, like what happens in Skyward Sword or Majora's Mask, he instead creates another timeline entirely, like when Link time travels back in Ocarina of Time. So everything that happens in Age of Calamity happens entirely in its own continuity. That means the descendants are brought back to save the day, but they are descendants from this brand new continuity, not the ones from the timeline that would eventually become Tears of the Kingdom. That's why none of the descendants in Tears of the Kingdom ever mention anything to do with going back in time to avert a different reality Calamity, because they are a separate set of descendants entirely from those in Age of Calamity. Basically, Age of Calamity creates another timeline branch, but instead of becoming a full timeline, it's just like a little timeline stub. It exists, and this makes it canon, but it'll never be revisited, and it won't ever impact the rest of the series. Age of Calamity is essentially canon to itself. Non-believers in this theory primarily have two arguments. The first being, if Age of Calamity is canon, why isn't it on the timeline? Surely, if it did in fact really happen, even isolated as a single branch, it would be added to the official timeline. The counterpoint to that is to mention that Age of Imprisonment absolutely is canon, and as of writing this video, it has also not been added to the timeline. So being canon doesn't automatically lead to a timeline placement. The other argument is from more of a dismissive, pessimistic view, and that is, it doesn't really matter if Age of Calamity is canon because of the fact that it doesn't connect. It being its own little timeline branch, not continued on in any way, shape, or form, is basically the same thing as not really being canon, because it has zero impact on the rest of the franchise. There are well thought out arguments on both sides. I personally am of the camp that it isn't canon, but I think the arguments for canonicity certainly have merit. And with that, my friends, we have reached the end of our exploration of the top of the iceberg. If you sat through all 2 hours of this behemoth's second video, I truly can't thank you enough. This iceberg layer was definitely more interesting than the last, but I do know these early layers can be somewhat unexciting for you diehard fans out there. I hope I provided good background material for a few days worth of chores at the very least. The good news is that the truly interesting stuff starts next video, so I hope you'll join me once more as we delve further down, leaving behind the safety of the top of the iceberg aboard as we begin to explore the shallow waters. These videos are an insane amount of work, so I hope you'll bear with me as the next one may take a while to release, but I promise you it'll be worth the wait. Thanks so much for watching. If you have any interesting thoughts related to any of the Iceberg entries, any corrections to make, if you want to share your checklist score, or anything else comes to your mind, please do comment below. I'll see you for the next video, and as always, stay safe out there. It's dangerous to go alone.